You ever notice how, after something terrifying happens, the world feels wrong for a while? Like everything looks the same, but it's hollow somehow. The colors are there, the shapes, the sounds, but they feel like they're made out of paper, ready to crumble if you touch them. That's how Willow Creek felt to me after that night. After the photograph of Sarah, after the message telling me he'd be back tomorrow night. I didn't sleep. I didn't even sit down. I spent the whole night moving from room to room, checking the locks over and over. I kept every light on, even in the closets. But when the sun finally came up, I realized I hadn't looked outside once. Maybe I didn't want to see if he was there. By morning, my body felt like it was made of lead, but I couldn't rest. Every time my eyes started to close, I'd hear something, a soft creak, a faint tap, and he'd be wide awake again, clutching the knife. I told myself he'd be ready when night came, that I'd sit by the door, wait for him, end it. But the hours slipped away, and with every tick of the clock, my confidence faded. By dusk, I was trembling so badly I could barely make tea. The moment the sun dropped below the trees, the phone rang. I didn't answer it. Couldn't. I just let it ring until it stopped. Then, 5 minutes later, the back porch light went out. Not flicker, went out. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the black square of the window, my breath fogging the glass. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, from the dark outside, came a low knock. Not on the door, on the glass. 3 slow taps. A pause. Then 3 more. I froze. The knock came again, louder this time. My hand moved toward the light switch, but before I could touch it, the phone rang again. The sound was so sudden I nearly screamed. I snatched it up without thinking. Margaret, just my name? Said slowly. What do you want from me? I asked. A pause. Then, in that same calm, measured tone, you left something in the attic. The line went dead. I stood there, the silence pressing in on me, the words looping in my head. The attic. I hadn't been up there in years. Not since Daniel died. My knees felt like they'd give out as I pulled down the creaky ladder. The air that spilled out was cold, stale. I climbed slowly, each step groaning under my weight. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just boxes, dust, and the faint smell of mothballs. But in the far corner, there was something new. A wooden crate, the lid pried half open. Inside were my things, but not how I'd left them. Old photo albums, pieces of jewelry, a scarf my mother had knitted me when I was 20. Each item wrapped in newspaper like someone had been preserving them. And at the very bottom a shoebox. When I lifted the lid, my heart stopped. Photographs. Dozens of them. All of me. Some from years ago, others from just days before. Me walking to the store. Me in my garden. Me sitting at the kitchen table. All taken from a distance. And in the center of the box, one photo that made my stomach turn, me sleeping in the motel bed. I dropped the box. Some of the pictures slid across the floor, face up. And that's when I saw one that wasn't of me at all. It was of Daniel, lying on the kitchen floor, the night he died. But in the picture, I wasn't the only one there. Standing just beyond the edge of the light was a man in a dark coat. His face turned toward the camera. The same face I've seen watching me for months. The same face from 1984. The same face that hasn't aged a day. I think that's when I finally understood. This wasn't just about what happened to Daniel. This was something older, deeper, something that had been following me long before I even came to Willow Creek. I backed toward the attic ladder, my hands shaking so hard I almost fell. When my feet hit the hallway floor, I didn't even bother closing the hatch. I just ran to the kitchen, locked the door, and slid down against the wall, staring at the dark window. That's when I saw it. On the outside of the glass, pressed flat against it was a single muddy handprint. But it wasn't mine. And it was too big to be Danielle's. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at it. The night stretched on, quiet except for the occasional creak from somewhere in the house. By morning, the handprint was gone. And in its place, taped to the window, was another envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, blank except for 4 words in the center, tonight. Bring the knife. I didn't leave the kitchen all morning. The note lay on the table like a loaded gun. Those 4 words burning into my mind, tonight. Bring the knife. What knife? Did he mean the kitchen knife I've been keeping with me? Or did he mean Danielle's knife? The one from that night? The one he'd buried deep in the bottom of a storage trunk in the basement. The thought made my stomach churn. By noon, I'd made up my mind. I was going to leave Willow Creek. I didn't care if I had to abandon everything in this house. If this was some sick game, I wasn't going to play. But when I opened the front door, my plan ended. There, on the porch, was a small black duffel bag. No one in sight. No sound of a car driving away. Just the bag, waiting. I should have left it, but I didn't. Inside were clothes, mine, folded neatly. A pair of shoes I hadn't worn in years. And at the bottom, a small wooden box. When I opened it, my blood went cold. It was Danielle's knife. Clean, polished, the wooden handle smooth from years of use. And wrapped around the blade was a single strand of long, dark hair. Not mine. The air in the house felt heavier after that, like the walls themselves were closing in. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the knife for hours, until the sky outside turned a deep, bruised purple. That's when the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe madness, made me pick it up. His voice was calm, almost polite. "Margaret, it's time to tell the truth." I gripped the receiver so hard my hand ached. "Who are you?" "You know who I am." "I don't," I said, but my voice was shaking. "Then look outside," he replied. I turned toward the window, heart pounding. And there he was. Not across the street. Not at the edge of the yard. Standing on my porch. I dropped the phone, ran to the back door, and fumbled with the lock, but it was already unlocked. I slammed it shut, threw the bolt, and backed away. A slow, deliberate knock came from the front door. 3 knocks. A pause. 3 more. Then his voice again, muffled through the wood. "Bring the knife, Margaret. Let's finish what you started." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knock came again, harder this time. And then silence. When I finally worked up the courage to look through the peephole, the porch was empty. But on the floor just inside the door, there was something new, a small, square piece of paper. A photograph. It was me, standing at the attic window. Taken from outside. Taken today. I hadn't been in the attic today. I sat down hard, the edges of the photo cutting into my fingers. My mind was reeling. If he'd been in the attic when? How? I didn't have long to think. A sound from upstairs froze me in place. Not footsteps exactly, more like something dragging across the floor, slow, heavy. I took the knife in my hand and crept up the stairs, every muscle tight. The sound was coming from my bedroom. The door was slightly open. I pushed it, the hinges groaning. The first thing I saw was the closet door, open wide. Inside a chair. And sitting in that chair, perfectly still, was a mannequin. Dressed in my clothes. My hairbrush balanced on its lap. And around its neck my wedding necklace. But that wasn't the worst part. Pinned to its chest was another photograph. Sarah again. Only this time, she wasn't sitting at my table. She was lying on the floor. Eyes closed, a dark shadow stretching across her face. I stumbled back, bell rising in my throat. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. I spun toward the corner of the room, knife raised. But there was nothing there. Just the open window, the curtain moving in the breeze. I ran to it, leaned out, scanning the yard. Empty. But in the distance, just beyond the tree line, I could see the shape of someone walking away. Slowly. Not running. Like they knew I wouldn't follow. By the time I reached the porch, they were gone. It was then I realized the knife was no longer in my hand. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the bathroom again, door locked, flashlight ready. But around 3 in the morning, I heard something I hadn't heard before, the faint sound of a voice. Singing. It was low, slow, almost like a lullaby. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to make out the words, but they weren't in English. The sound moved through the house, drifting from room to room, until it stopped outside the bathroom door. Silence. And then the faintest tap. Not a knock, just a single, light touch against the wood. When the sun came up, I unlocked the door, stepping carefully into the hall. The air smelled faintly of aftershave again. And in the center of the hallway floor was a small, wrap box. Inside another photograph. This one of me, taken years ago, standing on a street I didn't recognize. But behind me, clear as day, was the man in the coat. I was smiling in the photo, and my hand was holding his dot. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, staring at that photograph. My own smiling face, my hand holding his. How could that be? I had no memory of ever meeting this man before last fall. No memory of standing in that street, wearing those clothes. The photo looked decades old, but I looked exactly the same as I do now. My first thought was that it was a trick, some kind of photo manipulation. But the edges were worn, and the colours had the faded look of genuine old film, the kind you can't fake easily. By late afternoon, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I called the sheriff again, even though I knew what he'd say. He picked up on the second ring. "Margaret, you need to rest. You're seeing patterns in shadows." "I have proof," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Photographs. From years ago. Of him. Of me." There was a pause on the line. "Bring them to the station tomorrow," he said finally. "Well, take a look." But I knew that meant nothing. Tomorrow might be too late. As night fell, I found myself pacing the house, checking every lock twice, then 3 times. I put the photographs back in the box, shoved it under the bed. But I kept one in my pocket, the one of me holding his hand. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted a reminder that this was real, that I wasn't losing my mind. It was nearly midnight when the first sound came. A faint scraping from somewhere outside, like metal against wood. I grabbed the knife from the knit stand and crept to the window. The yard was dark, my porch light dead again. The scraping stopped. I waited, every muscle tight, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Then, from the hallway behind me, came the soft creak of a floorboard. I spun, but the hallway was empty. I moved slowly toward the stairs, knife in hand. At the bottom, I saw it. The front door was open just an inch, swaying slightly in the draft. I forced myself down the steps, my feet heavy on the wood. I reached the door, pushed it shut, locked it, and when I turned around, there was a shadow moving across the living room wall. I lunged forward, flicking on the light, but the room was empty. Only the coffee table had changed. On it sat a single envelope. Inside was a key. Old, brass, heavy. Tied to it was a tag with 2 words written in neat black ink, "Upstairs closet." I didn't want to go. Every instinct in me screamed to throw the key away, burn it, pretend I never saw it. But my hands moved on their own. I climbed the stairs, the key cold in my palm. At the end of the hall was the closet in the guest room. I hadn't opened it in years. The lock was stiff, resisting me until finally, with a loud click, it turned. The door swung open slowly. Inside was not the cluttered space I remembered. No boxes, no winter coats. Just a single wooden chair in the center. And on the chair a small, reel-to-reel tape recorder. A note was taped to the wall above it. "Press play." My fingers trembled as I reached for the button. At first, there was only static. Then a man's voice, low, steady. "We've met before, Margaret. More than once. You just don't remember." Static again. "Then, you thought Willow Creek was the beginning. It wasn't. You've been running much longer than that." I froze, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears. The tape clicked off suddenly, the reel still spinning silently. I backed out of the closet, leaving the key in the lock, and went straight to my bedroom. I shut the door, locked it, and sat against it, the knife beside me. But even through the locked door, I could hear it. The faint sound of someone's footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate stopping right outside. The doorknob turned once, twice, and then, in a whisper so quiet I almost thought I imagined it, came the words, "Tomorrow night." "Wear the dress." In the morning, I found another package on the porch. Inside was a dress I hadn't seen in decades. Pale blue, with tiny white buttons down the front. My mother's favourite dress on me when I was in my 20s. It still smelled faintly of lavender. Pinned to the collar was another note, "Dinner at 8. Don't be late." I left the dress on the porch for hours, afraid to even bring it inside. But every time I passed the front window, I swore I could see the faint outline of a man standing far down the road, barely moving, just watching. By noon, the figure was gone. I told myself I wasn't going to go through with whatever dinner he had in mind. That he'd call the sheriff again, show him everything, the photographs, the notes, the tape recorder. But when I reached for the box under my bed, it wasn't there. I tore the room apart, flinging open drawers, checking every corner. Nothing. The photographs, the knife, the box, all gone. My stomach dropped. That's when I saw it. On the pillow where I sleep, a single Polaroid. It was me, wearing the blue dress, sitting at my kitchen table, the same candle between the plates, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I don't own a camera. By the time the sky turned orange, my nerves were frayed to nothing. The house felt smaller, tighter. I kept catching glimpses of movement just outside the windows, a shadow slipping past, a flicker of dark fabric. At exactly 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Not the slow, deliberate knock from before. This one was softer, almost polite. I stood frozen in the hallway, my back pressed to the wall, holding my breath. The knock came again, followed by his voice, calm, steady. "Margaret, you look lovely tonight." I hadn't put the dress on, but when I looked down, I was wearing it. My knees went weak. I grabbed the nearest chair for balance. My mind scrambled for an answer. Had I fallen asleep? Lost time again? Or was I forgetting on purpose? The front door creaked open. I knew he'd locked it, but the deadbolt slid free like it had never been set. I stepped backward toward the kitchen, but my heel caught on something, a second chair, pulled out from the table. The candle on the table was already lit. 2 glasses of red wine, steam rising from 2 plates of food. And sitting across from where I stood was a man in a dark coat. His face was finally visible in the soft flicker of the candle light. He didn't look like a stranger. He looked familiar, older than me, but not by much. A face I might have known once, in another lifetime. Lines around the eyes, a faint scar above the right eyebrow. "Sid," he said, his voice gentle, almost kind. I didn't move. "Margaret," he said again, "you've run long enough." The air in the kitchen felt heavy, pressing down on my chest. I glanced toward the front door, but it was closed now. "You were there that night," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "When Daniel," he nodded. "I've been there every night." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Why?" He smiled slightly. "Because you asked me to." My mind reeled, searching for meaning in those words. But before I could speak, he slid something across the table toward me. It was the missing photograph, the one of me holding his hand. Only this time, there was writing on the back. 4 words in my own handwriting, "Don't let me forget." I stared at him, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Forget what?" I asked. His smile faded. "That you're not the victim here." Before I could move, before I could ask anything else, the candle flickered violently, and every light in the house went out. In the darkness, I heard his chair scrape back, his footsteps moving toward me, slow, unhurried. Then his voice, right next to my ear, "Tomorrow we start over."